So the first of your requests, like I said, like Ricky, was to give you a good drunk story. And I can't give you one because I have none. But I can tell you of my wife. Her name is Yumiko. Yumiko, to say it right. I can't believe how many years I said my own wife's name wrong. Maybe I still get it wrong sometimes. We've been together forever, and I love that woman dearly. She is an amazing human being. And I want to tell you a story that's connected to drunkenness that is may satisfy your request, although it doesn't have any alcohol connected with it necessarily. I know that wasn't your interest. You're not asking for drunken stories. You're asking for the interesting life anecdotes, human stories related to said situation. So here it is. I won't go on because I don't like to repeat myself and I don't like to look back at the past, but you may know that I suffered a huge life failure in Japan. After I got back on my feet and got that job at that religious school as a teacher there, I was invited to Nomikai, the Japanese drinking parties. Not often, but regularly. I was liked at the school, like I may have gained from my earlier talk about work. I'm a very, very serious worker. If my friend Mully sees this podcast, he'll go, "Yeah, Kurt sure is. He's the most uptight worker you've ever known. I'm a perfect fit for a Japanese salaryman. I would fit perfectly if I could just speak the language." So as a result, I was always invited to all of the nomikai when there was a new instructors, the new batch of instructors came in, batch of teachers came in every year. Someone retired, some big life event happened. They always invited Kato Sensei because Kato Sensei was one of us in a way, and partially because Kato Sensei knew that he wasn't one of us, and that was good too. I knew my place. I know my place in Japan as a Gaijin foreigner. My place is to be other. So, remember, I had failed. My wife and I had gone to the edge. Now, my wife had witnessed me climb back up to get a great job, working at a great school, making a great salary for Japan, and set and settled for life. I could have stayed there for the rest of my life. So, being the good mother that she is, the good wife that she is, and I hope if my wife ever sees this, which I doubt she ever will, but I hope she'll take this with the most sincere and flattering intent. My dear wife, Suzuki Yumiko, I think of her as the last Showa wife. Now, those of you who are familiar with Japan will require no more explanation than what I just said. The last Showa wife. You know in your minds, and Ricky, if you hear this, you know exactly what that means. A Japanese woman, and I'll explain it for the benefit of those that don't know what that means. Showa is an era in Japan. Now, what is it, 1989 to 2000? Oh gosh, I can't remember. I used to know. Anyway, it's a period of time. No. It's 1930 something to 1989 or something like that. It's the reign of the Showa Emperor Hirohito Sama. I'm embarrassed that I don't know. I know my eras. I know my eras, from Edo on, but I've had too much of this apple cidery stuff. Anyway, the Showa era is probably the closest that we can come in the American context would be boomer. If we call someone a boomer, and I am a boomer, I'm born in 1964, the last year of the boomers, so is my wife. If you say a boomer, you get an impression of mind of exactly what that person is like. And it's usually pretty accurate. If you call someone a Showa person, a Showa man, a Showa woman, especially a Showa wife, especially a Showa mother, maybe Showa wife is more than the mother. You get those in the Japan know get an exact impression of what that means. What that means for those that don't know, and I'm going to add it like footnotes right here, is that that's a woman. If I call someone a Showa wife, and in modern politically correct phrases, it may not fit well, but that means a woman, in particular a Japanese woman, whose first priority, loyalty, and ascendant attention is to the well-being of her children, her family, and I'm putting him last, her husband. There's a deliberate reason I put that person last. Now, true, in the Showa, proper Showa sense, the man would be the center of everything in terms of show. First in the bath, first to eat, first to be heard, always the one to make the decision. Yet, in the Showa wife's mind, he has one main job. And my wife, after all that happened to us, and I found myself in a position of supporting the family through this one job that after our great fall had irreparably left a chasm in both the mind of my wife and I. Yumiko summoned her Showa wifeness after I had that job, and I was invited to my first Nomikai, the first drinking party, which consists of, in Japanese terms, with different levels of parties. There's the first party, the second party, the third party, etc. And each of these parties consists one after another. She reminded me, because she'd told me this before, of a phrase from the Showa period, or maybe it's even before that. Ricky, I think your lips will turn up on either side when you hear this, in a smile of thoughtful recognition. Yumiko reminded me as I told her, as I headed out for that work day, and I told her there was a Nomikai that night, that I might be late. And she reminded me, if I don't belabor this point and carry it on, so something's got the hounds going, and the horse neighing. Yumiko, my dear wife, told me, Kurt, remember, and this is my Showa wife speaking, a good husband is healthy and absent. And as if to hammer the point in most clearly, as I left the door and she stood there at the edge of the Genkan, wishing me well as I headed out to do my job. Most Japanese homes, modern homes that is, include, in addition to a lock on the door, a special little latch that closes that can hold the door secure so that if someone ping-pongs on the doorbell, then the housewife, which is not a derogatory term in Japan, opens the door. She's alone in her home and she doesn't want to subject herself to any risk. Who knows who it is without the door? She wants to open the door and face the person while without. She can do this little latch thing that folds out. The door opens, but maybe 3 inches or so. She can see their face, but there's no way the door can open. It's held fast, secure. The woman is safe. The housewife is safe. The mother is safe. The wife is safe. And she can interchange with the person without. As I left that night to go to work, that day, that morning, to go to work, When the Nomikai would happen that very night, my Showa wife reminded me at the door in her slippers, leaning out over the genkan to close the door behind me. She reminded me that, Kurt, remember, a good husband in Japan is healthy and absent. And she hammered the point home by telling me that the latch would be shut until late enough at night to ensure I did my duty. Now, Ricky and all the rest already understand everything implied in this. For those that may not be in the know, I'll just add, and I'm not insulting you by saying you may not be in the know, but if you don't know Japanese culture, it may not be clear. What she meant by that was that she would lock the latch probably until midnight. Why? Well, this requires a little more elucidation, a little more explanation. And forgive me, I know those that are out there that are going to see this, they're going to say, oh my gosh, Kurt's a drunk. But I'm going to have a little more of this cider because I needed to get through this story. And indulge me, it's just this once a week. So what? Have a sip. A word about the Japanese nomikai. Nomi means drink. Kai means party. It's a drinking party. Ichikai. Is it ichikai? Nikai. Sankai. Am I getting it right? My Japanese is so terrible. There's different layers and levels to each such engagement. I'm saying it wrong, so I'll just switch to English because that's all I can speak. The first party is the most propitious. It's when everybody comes together. Now remember, I worked at a religious school, a Catholic school, and I would be invited. Let's use this one circumstance that I was referring to, my wife telling me that a good husband is healthy and absent, and she expected me to stay out long enough to be a respectable Japanese style breadwinner. What this means is, for the first party, the principal and all of the teachers and staff would be invited to the event, which would be held at a nice establishment not far from the school where everybody could attend. For those that have never experienced it, I'm going to spend a little bit of time to explain it because you need to understand what this is. And it is an experience worth having. It's an experience worth giving up your life as a young person, wherever you are, and going to Japan to live there for a few years just to have this experience. And then you can call it quits and go back to wherever you came from. Everybody should have this experience of a nomikai, a proper nomikai. Forget about the political correctness. That stuff doesn't really matter here. We're talking about the reality of the way things are, or at least the reality of the way things were, and the way they reverberate into the present tense. So in that first party, as proper as it is, everybody attends, right from the principal down to the secretaries. And what I mean by secretaries are at the school where I worked, the receptionist who greeted people at the door, the people in the staff office, the school nurse, etc. Everybody was there, men and women alike. Men and women alike. That's important distinction, the men and the women, who are not equal and not the same in Japan, still to this day. As much as a vexing problem that may be, it's also a boon in some ways. Depends on your perspective. Like I said, that would usually be at a nice establishment, and everybody begins the night sober in a big table in a huge room, long table with the Kocho sensei, the principal at one end, and his attendant, the vice principal. the senior staff at that one end, usually the part of the room farthest from the door, with all the other teachers along the way. The junior, or the foreign staff at the far end by the door, maybe oblivious to the fact that that signifies their low rank on the totem pole. Or in some cases, the foreigner might be invited to sit next to the principal, which is a privilege and an honor that the many foreigners aren't even aware has occurred. It's a funny thing to be so honored and not even know it. Anyway, that goes on for an hour or so. And then after some drinks have been had, some great food has been had, probably the best food of the evening in terms of price, everybody adjourns and steps outside. And there's this event that occurs outside where there's groups huddle and bow and apologize. And what happens is that most of the women, like I said, men and women are not equal in Japan. They occupy separate roles, separate spheres, separate proprietous expectations. Ricky would know that very well. She has embraced the role of, I think, the Japanese woman in Japan, although she's a Western woman, in fact. She understands the frame of mind of the West. I'm not saying that, Ricky, if you hear this, that you're subservient or anything like this, but you seem to have embraced the best traits of the feminine world in Japan and have made them your own. And I admire that. I respect that. And I think it's an amazing thing. And I'm glad for it. I'm glad that there's those differences. Although I certainly am sad when they go in the way of causing pain to anybody. But I'm talking off on a tangent now. At the end of that first party, that event that occurs, the groups will separate and most of the women will leave. What's left is the men. And if maybe, one or two women will hang on to shuffle down the street to a lesser bar, a smaller establishment, probably better food, better drink, more noise, more atmosphere, to continue the second party. You get the gist of where this is going, right? Gone at the second party are the fancy sake cups and the salutes of praise, the solicitous toasts. Now it's more genuine. Things are happening at a human level. They carry on like that for an hour or more. Yakitori, onigiri, bowls of edamame, plain food karage, salted to the extreme. Copious glasses of beer, maybe sake, for the men who can handle it. The women, I'm sorry, I don't mean to set you apart, but they're mostly at their end by this point. When we step out to the curb at the end of the second party, the women are mostly peeled away and gone. It's left to the men for the third round, in which case we stumble, maybe arm over shoulder, one by one, three by three, scattered across the curb. Other groups of similar such men, groups, comrades, the women all gone, coming in the opposite direction. Anything will do now. Any restaurant or bar. Bar only. Any izakaya. Izakaya, the right word, will do. And we make our way inside and we find ourselves huddled at the back, and the cute attendant waitress will appear, take our orders, or maybe it's a young man. It doesn't matter. And we drink. We eat our way into oblivion. Harsh words, true words, authentic words are said. Things to the boss's face, if the boss is still there. The boss may be gone. Some bosses know better to make it to the Sanjikai. If you're a boss and you come to the Sanjikai, you're asking for it. You're going to hear things. You're going to hear it. Better probably that you left already with your little purse thing and you're clutched under your hand and your tie slightly askew. Go home to your family in your nice home. Let the younger men now vent and steam off their feelings, their challenges in the third party going past midnight. Oh, is tomorrow a work day? Yes, it is. Never you mind. Now, I think I've explained the Japanese nomikai sufficiently for those that don't know. What I need to add, though, is that in the strain of the old idea of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, what happens at nomikai stays at nomikai. Whatever words are said, whatever exchanges occur, are left at that. We all show up the next day and time at our school with our shirts buttoned up, our ties tight if we wear them, like nothing happened. Oh, but what about my wife? What about my wife's comment that a good husband is healthy and absent? Her meaning was that she expected me to stay to the end, or at least to nearly the end, as far as I could. Because those junior men who make it to the end have sealed a camaraderie, a guilt of sorts, of confession and experience and painful expression that comes of being younger men, subordinate men in a hierarchy that hurts and pains and demands. And if I do that, if I can make it to that, even though I don't speak Japanese, the very fact that I made it to the end would solidify my place among them, among the younger men who would one day be the senior men. And my place, even though as a foreigner, I could never be one of the seniors. I could never even be one of the normal ones. But I would always be welcome in their midst because I, in a very true yet peripheral sense, was one of them. Now, I'm happy to say that after my great failure in Japan, I brought my family to the verge of no less than destitute. Not once in any one of the nomikai that I ever attended did I stumble home to find the door secured any more than the primary lock. No mechanism barred my presence. My Showa wife, whether she actually secured that lock or not, deemed my efforts sufficient to meet my obligation as a Showa man.